Welcome along to today's webinar on the role of innovation in performance. Thanks a lot to PSN for bringing together all the moving parts, pulling the strings to make sure that we've been in a position to have this conversation. I'm excited to be a part of it, to moderate the conversation today. My name is Andrew Trimble. I'm the Director of Athlete Performance here at Teamworks. So welcome along to PSN, welcome along to Todd Atkins and Aman, Singh, Shergill. I'll introduce those guys in more detail in a second, but PSN are a private and exclusive network for the sports industry, bringing together senior professionals and industry leaders in elite sport to share best practices on a completely invite-only and complimentary basis. So thanks a lot to them for putting together today's event. And there's obviously a focus on the role of innovation in elite sport. So today's webinar, we're going to hear from Aman Singh Shergill, Head of Innovation and Performance Science. Aman is an accomplished sports scientist, blending academic rigor and practical expertise in elite football. He rose through the ranks at Birmingham City before joining Aston Villa, and now he's leading on their innovation and performance science initiatives alongside his club work. He just generally specializes on data management and tech integration. So, Aman, welcome along to the webinar today.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. Cheers.
And then alongside Aman, we've got Todd Atkins, Product Success Manager at Teamworks. Todd is going to share some insights on how elite performance environments are approaching the integration of AI and emerging technologies, and how new tools are being adopted. And I suppose that crucial kind of balance between data and human insights and the practical challenges of implementing some change in that area. We're going to look at the importance of athlete management systems in general, and then Teamworks Athlete Management System. We're going to go through a live demo. And some of the philosophy, performance philosophy we discussed, we're going to go through kind of the practicalities of what that looks like through Todd giving us a live tour of Teamworks AMS. So if everybody's happy enough, we'll just kick on here. I'm really excited about this conversation. We'll talk generally for the first half hour around performance philosophies, and you would have filled out a form. Nearly everybody wants to hear about AI. There's a whole kind of range of kind of levels of excitement and people being daunted and people being cautious about AI, and people generally are interested to see where we lie in the performance space and how the impact that AI is going to have on some of us as practitioners, as fans, as performance coaches, as players. Everybody wants to have, get an understanding of where we're going with that. So we'll have that conversation amongst other kind of more general appreciation of adoption of technology and the most up-to-date tools out there in the market. Any questions? We want this to be a general conversation, not just asking these two questions from me, but we want everybody to be part of that conversation and collaborate on that learning together. So if anybody's got any questions, just add them into the chat box, add them directly to me, and then we'll be able to share some of those questions and pick the brains of these guys for the last 10 minutes. So let's kick on. Aman, let's start with you. Let's go straight in the deep end, not getting to know each other. Let's go straight in. What's your current approach to AI, and how much emphasis are you placing on it now, and in the future, where do you anticipate this going over the next period?
Yeah, it's something we and I have got my eye on a lot. I think you have to. The rise has been exponential, probably mainly in the last 12 months. In general society, never mind sport. It's more popular, it's more accessible, it's free, and also there are models that are more advanced that are paid for. So it's in everyone's hands. That it's incumbent on me to know what's going on in that space and how it can be used. I think how it can be used or will be used is a really interesting space. It's something that we're spending a lot of time really thinking about, because I think if you rush into it too quickly now and trying to do things that you don't know if the systems are set and ready to do yet, you could get yourself going off on a tangent and probably putting a lot of resource and time in areas that I think may not be the questions you have. So I think with any of these things, whether it's technology you're adding in or whether it is an arm of technology in terms of AI, you have to know what questions does your environment have first and foremost, and that always has to be the fundamental of of what you do and anything you add in my environment, in your world where you work or where your interest is, what the challenge is, what questions do we have, what do we want to be able to do better. And that should always be the foundation for then where you use technology or where you use different things to try and address. My first aim and first goal of using AI is what's medial jobs, what time-consuming jobs that are done on a regular basis by loads of different members of staff, can it quickly reduce the cost of, and where can we get some real sharp efficiency gains around the performance, medical, whatever team it is, quickly by implementing AI, whether that's to help do mathematical problems, whether that's to help do organizational issues. I think that's the area where right now I feel most organizations and teams could benefit most with, is putting their time in where can we take a job that takes 40 minutes quite manually to 5 minutes with the use of AI. I think that's going to be the steepest benefit of efficiency.
So in that example, that use case, Aman, there's known unknowns. So you're trying to discover the answer to some question. And that obviously that's like very clear use case and efficiencies in that space. But do you ever see a world where it'll shine a light on something that you didn't even know you didn't know?
Yeah, I think it can do that, because it's what it can do right now is scary. Like, we're all sat here doing things with it, asking different AI channels questions, and I was sat there like amazed at how quickly it's doing stuff. So there's no reason one day it couldn't. But I think as scientists, we have to keep our scientific rigor. There's been a few examples I've seen with AI being used in and around building, in and around people I know researching, where things aren't correct. You know, it can pull up relationships that may statistically somewhat be there, but we have to still be the good science and the practitioners in the back who delve into it deeper and identify what that relationship's only there because two players fall in that relationship heavily and the rest of the squad don't, or actually looking into the detail, because it can make mistakes. I do see a day potentially where organizations that have their data very well managed in their own internal systems or with athlete management systems are able to maybe have an AI chatbot potential type thing sat in front of their data set. So sat at face value in the user interface, where we can ask it questions in our usual language and have it go and pull from all our different data streams and give us an educated answer based on the data. I can see that coming.
And then obviously if that's the direction we go, and that's the kind of, I'd imagine when everybody imagines where we could go with performance intelligence, analytics, performance AI, that definitely is where everybody imagines we go. Let's ask the tech, show us something we don't know, or tell us something about that player, where their training load is, or how prepared is that player to execute. And then, as you say, like getting an understanding and a skill around the correct prompts, and prompting it in the correct way and avoiding our bias. I just got back from holidays there, and I've one daughter that asked my wife. She said, "Do you think her sister watches too much TV?" I kind of thought, well, that's an example of someone who thinks they watch too much TV. So like inherent in that is the kind of bias within the prompt. How kind of much skill development will there be in terms of understanding how to use these tools scientifically, I suppose?
Yeah, I think that's an education that we will need to be responsible for providing, if we're going to also be the guys who advocate pushing AI. Exactly as you say, there is a confirmation bias with it. If you go into any of your AI places and ask questions in a certain way, it will try and take you that direction you want to take it. And if you then promptly deny what you've said and claim strongly it was the other way, it will go with you again and say, yeah, you're right. It will find a way of doing that, which is why it's very dangerous to wholeheartedly go towards it. I think we have to still see the AI as with anything data related or tech related, we're getting information. Whether it's we're measuring something, we're analyzing something, whatever it is, we're getting information, in our case on athletes, on footballers, which is there to help inform us on certain area, whether it's how they're training, how ready they are, whatever it might be. The data is there to help inform us on that piece, and then us as skilled practitioners have to interpret that information and understand what that means, then actions going forward. And I think that doesn't change. We still have to have that same feedback loop, that same process. But AI is there to make that gap between we've just gathered some data from something and we need to make a decision to improve the quality of that gap and reduce the amount of work potentially that needs to be done in that gap. But it's not going to make the decision at the end of the day. It's going to give the information hopefully quicker, maybe with a bit more context, maybe in a shinier way. But then the skilled practitioners still need to interpret that, put it into the context of the world they're living in the football club, whatever it might be, in the player himself, and then have a decision as an MDT or an individual to make. When we get to the point where we're starting to ask AI or different things, is this guy ready or should we do something with a player? That's where I think we're in dangerous territory because we're no longer then using our experience and skill sets.
Okay, so in that whole continuum from kind of daunted, intimidated, cautious, and excited, I'm gonna have you in the category of kind of cautiously excited towards this end of the
That's
scale.
fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. Cautiously excited.
Okay. Next question: how do you utilize technology and innovation and ensure that athletes and the performance department in general are they're aligned on that? And Todd, I'm keen to get your thoughts on this after we hear from Aman.
I think along with AI, just generally tech across the board, whether it's on pitch, wearables, gym, measuring outside of the pitch, health and well-being, it's just ever increasing. Um, if you look to my LinkedIn messages, you'll see there's about 7 a day of different new tech that people are trying to get in and use. And they're not necessarily bad, and it's not a negative thing. It's because technology has improved generally in the world. We can do things now that we couldn't do before. But we're very big, and we always have conversations. And I encourage us to know what are our challenges, what things do we wish we could do better, do we want to do better, what areas can we not measure or we can't do things efficiently in that we want to have, and then we try and find tech to help us answer our internal questions. I think when you're far when your window of vision is too big and you're openly taking everything in and you don't have some sort of process to take it in, you can end up with a lot of junk. And I think a lot of organizations do that, football clubs or whatever sports clubs. You can go to many places and see a lot of equipment. I was like, yeah, we used to use that 2 years ago, and we used to use this a year ago. And that's the reason why, because it seems great, it seems nice, but no one's really thought through the process. So we have a process that we go through that I encourage, which is around if we're going to get a new piece of tech, it's MDT, it's everyone involved. It's we have a process of the validity and the reliability, the how we're going to implement it, what are we actually going to do with it, what are the numbers, have we tried and tested it, and the last part, which is the most important, is what does it mean? If we get this tech and it tells us this, then what are we actually going to do? Because if we can't answer them questions before we've got it, then we're certainly not going to answer it when we're flying with it.
Todd, what does that look like in your experience with alignment across different departments, different practitioners, connecting those different performance practitioners and the athletes as well? What does that look like in your experience of implementing Teamworks AMS and generally what that mindset looks like?
Yeah, I'd echo what Aman said really, and I think the key point for me is being athlete centric. And Aman, we've spoke about that really, that the athlete kind of has to be the end outcome and what we're working around. So when I talk around that, like the decisions are made around them, the technology that we use is useful for them, they're on board as well. And I think that part of the alignment between the performance team and the athlete is really done by bringing that athlete along on the journey as well. Like you stick these wearables and all this tech on a individual or a player, and it's like, well, what do I get from this? And how do you get your athletes and players to buy into that process when they don't get any feedback, they don't understand why that data has been collected. So I think a really big part that we see is having the athletes as part of that journey, as part of that performance team, and getting to see output from that data or getting insight from that, or it might just be a practitioner sitting with them and walking through them, but feeling part of, okay, if I'm going to provide this information through a wearable or a questionnaire, what am I getting from it? And we've seen that kind of work really well with a lot of partners of ours, that when you bring that athlete along with you, it makes it a lot easier to align and you get that greater buy-in from them. So I think kind of being that athlete centric is really important.
Aman, have you any examples of what that looks like, or um, I suppose the practicalities of bringing athletes on board? My experience as an athlete, and granted, different sport you've spent time in rugby. we often find ourselves in the gym and we look down and see the force plate, and we see someone on a force plate, doing their thing, and you'd have like five five guys standing around all with their clipboards. And it did occur to us as players, we're going, well, they're all getting their PhDs, but what are we getting from this? Is this going to make us any better? So we, maybe to our shame, I don't know, we were just maybe a little bit cynical, or we sort of thought, well, I don't really see it, and we mightn't have been the most compliant as a result. How would you fix that problem in rugby, Aman?
Don't know about in rugby. I've got no experience there, but my philosophy in my career so far, and it's so far as well with me, is real open communication. Is sitting down with players. I think when I first started and I was learning off the kind of experienced people I had above me and heading departments at the time, there was a culture still to get groups of players in a room and get the whole squad in the room and let's educate, let's show them why we're doing this, show them doing that. Whether it's just the environment I'm in or generally society now, I don't think that works as well. I think athletes want, exactly as Todd mentioned, to be athlete centric. They want to know why it's going to work for them, specifically me as a human being, not us as a group of players. So our approach and my philosophy is very much communication with the player. Get them into a room or whatever's specific for that player. Some players like to sit down and talk 1v1, some is a chat in the gym, some is upstairs in the dining room, whatever, and have that conversation of like, right, we're doing this and this is the reason why, and here's the benefit it's going to give to you. And I think what's really beneficial with these kind of things is that you speak about force play, for example, be real tight and specific with the metric or the number or whatever it is that that player is going to get. So they know what it means, they know exactly what it is, they know how it translates to performance. Then give them enough information that they start to understand what's normal for them. Because I could tell a player we're now going to measure your 30-meter speed. If they don't really know what a good 30-meter speed is, giving them a number right then doesn't really help. So giving them that education, that can come over time, but then constantly seeing their count movement jump and seeing what it is, but they need to understand it and know it, and then they will have that buy-in. But you're really right in saying the bit we often miss is their connection between, well, this exercise and number. How is that? How are you relating that to my performance and how I'm going to get better? And that's the bit my philosophy is you have to sit down with the player and help them understand and educate, and you can't do that I think less so in a group environment. You certainly can't do it in the moment of doing the exercise or whatever it might be.
Yeah, gotcha. And I definitely understand, and I kind of identify what you're saying there. And there's definitely occasions as a player where I would have seen decisions being made or something being used as a proxy for performance. This translates, and the understanding would have been this means this. And players generally, I think, are reasonably cynical. I think they're less cynical now. I'm probably articulating the mindset of an old, washed up, ex-professional rugby player, but now, it's a Strava generation. Everybody's a little bit nerdier and understands their data and understands what makes them tick. But there definitely is that challenge around communicating. This translates to this. Would you ever bring in the athletes and allow them, to kind of describe, well, here's why this doesn't work, or here's an alternative mechanism for measuring this data because this is more likely to translate to performance? Aman, have you ever
From the athlete or coming from ourselves?
from the athlete or even
Yeah.
from maybe from the coaches, a recently retired coach who really has their finger on the pulse of the game?
Yeah, feedback from the athlete is so important for us. As you say, we try and big on the individual emphasis. So in doing that, in having that philosophy, we have to speak to the athlete and we have to know we are the practitioners, so therefore we have a scientific underpinning and we should have a good reason and rationale as to why we're doing a certain thing. And therefore we might try and for a period get the player through a period to really make them not give up after 1, 2, 3, just because they don't fancy it or it's not something they've done before. But it does get to a point where you have to communicate with the athlete, and if they're telling you a certain thing that don't feel good doing this, or I used to do this in a previous club and that felt good. Big thing with that is when keeping athlete buy-in as well that we speak about is if the player feels good doing something and they enjoy doing it, then who are we to tell them not to do it? And how can we work around to either optimize that exercise or keep that in along with other things we think can help them? Because the feel-good factor is so important. And I think when you do that with a player, as any human, like we're talking about players here as if they're different types of human beings, but as any, it just shows a buy-in. It shows that I care about you and I want you to feel good and you to be in a good place. I'm in a job to try and help you from a certain aspect of performance. I'm going to meet you where you need to meet me, and now you meet me as well. And that's how the relationship can form. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's different in other places, but the days of trying to enforce a program or a way of working by fear and force of this is just what we're doing and you're all doing it, I don't think are successful, and you don't get the buy-in that we've managed to get.
I suppose the crux of that is that athletes don't always think like scientists, or they don't think like, yeah, sports scientists, or don't really understand data in the way that practitioners will. I suppose athletes will understand data like a scientist if that data means that they're going to get selected, or it's gonna work out well for them. But the other direction doesn't always work. Todd, just to bring you in, have you come across any other barriers whenever you're implementing new technology across performance department? Barriers from other practitioners or athletes, or what's been your experience of that?
Yeah, look, I think every partner's different and every kind of club and organization is at a different level of data maturity. Some have been adopting data for years. So when you bring in a new technology or a new system, it's really easily taken on. We also work with partners that are kind of using a new AMS or even just tech within their club for the first time. So they obviously have their difference of challenges. I think a big one for us is around that education piece of Man spoke there about educating the players, but it's also educating the staff as well of like, how does this system work? Like, what can we provide to you? Like, how can we make sure that this system or this technology fits within your culture and how you work? I think that's a lot of time we see that if we try and push a system or a piece of technology onto a club and we say it just works like this, that never has a good outcome. It just can't work that way. We have to sit and listen and go, okay, like, how do you currently work, or what have you had, or issues have you had with other systems or other technology, and try and learn from those and try and tailor it around that. So, yeah, it's not a culture thing, but sometimes it's just that education and listening to what they need. But another really big part, I guess, is the return on investment as well of implementing those technologies. It's very easy to just buy a new system and it looks really great and other clubs use it, but it's really hard, I guess. And Aman, you might have a bit more experience, but explain to those stakeholders and the people that perhaps pay for it of we're buying this system and it does this, but okay, what's the outcome and what do we actually get from it? Like, how is this going to make us better in games? How is this going to reduce the amount of injuries we get? How can we monitor players better? So I think that's a really big barrier for people is to, I guess, give a tangible piece of evidence to go, this is what this system or this piece of tech is doing for us. And there are ways to do it.
Sorry to jump into that. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, is a consequence of the type of conversation that goes on within a department or within an organization. Because if people themselves in a certain role are bringing in, and it's different levels, right? If it's a small piece of gym equipment that isn't really impacting everyone apart from the two S&C coaches and their players, then of course you don't need everyone involved. But we're talking about AMSs and we're talking about things that are designed to have a wide impact. If you're not having conversations as a wide MDT and able to have those discussions of why are we getting it? What's the idea? What does it look like? How does it work? And then what are we actually going to do? Real terms. Show me how this is going to make us, and it's not in a harsh way, but show me how this is actually going to make our department better or make us make a better decision on the player or whatever. You end up in that way exactly where someone may ask it, and then I think if you're a department who is sat there going, we might do this and it might do that, or you're just trying to frazzle brains above you just to try and get it in, I think it's not doing yourself a service.
Yeah, it's a really good point as well of AMS and systems like that many years ago were built, well, the practitioners usually obtained it. So it'd be a sports scientist working, needed a bit of help to centralize his data and produce some visualizations. But we're definitely seeing a shift, I think, more recently of that wider performance department coming onto these AMS systems. That's down from the sports scientists, the day-to-day S&C coaches, but the performance directors and now the sporting directors are starting to get a little bit more involved. They're aware that there's a system there that's collating information from medical, from the sports science, from the S&C. That provides to that performance director or sporting director a really useful platform to go, this is that 360 view of a player and I can see everything I need to on him. So I think there's a really big part there on that return investment side is, can you bring those stakeholders into that meeting, into that MDT meeting, and how can they feel like they're getting something from it as well? And it's not just for your S&C coach that's using it on his own and he's the only person that has access or can see the data. How can we make that accessible across the entire MDT and performance team? So I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah, Aman, Todd mentioned two things there. I suppose the ability for an AMS to offer value to different departments or different practitioners within that performance department and beyond that performance department as well. So offer different pieces of value to each stakeholder, and then offer flexibility because everybody wants to operate differently. Todd, and the point you made was rather than saying to a team, "Here's how you implement this software." Go kind of in discovery mode. How do you guys like to operate and how can we fit into that? So those two things, connecting those departments and offering value to all of them, and then the flexibility, and obviously with the Teamworks AMS, the flexibility within that. Like how, given those two pieces that are maybe potentially unique about Teamworks AMS, given those two pieces, how important does a role does an AMS, an efficient AMS, have in delivering success across this whole conversation, Aman, across whatever your mechanism is or whatever you're trying to discover, bringing together those departments efficiently and with some flexibility. How does an AMS contribute to that?
Because the definitely one thing I've seen is as a department gets bigger and wider and it increases in numbers and depth, it becomes more and more important. I think when you're in an environment where maybe it's a smaller football club, maybe resources are smaller, and you're basically sat in a room with all the people that are stakeholders because that's how it is. You can possibly get away with certain things that as you start to increase your resource, you can't anymore. And that's where an AMS is so important because it's the umbrella over, depending on how well used, a department, an MDT, or a whole football club that keeps information within that umbrella and cycles that information around wherever it needs to be. Again, I spoke about earlier the kind of feedback loop and the information chain we have is when we're talking about technology, data, it's all information. It's things that are designed to help us be more informed. And that can be anecdotal information as well. That's come from a physio who's just had a player on a bed and he's got a feeling about something, but maybe not physically, maybe to do with the player's mood and how he is. All this kind of information is so important for other people in that building. And having a well set up and structured AMS can allow for these kind of key bits of information, whether it's data or more subjective field, soft skill type stuff, to move around a department easier to make, again, everyone be in a position to make the best, more informed decisions they can. And I think for me, it just gives every practitioner more tools and puts them in a better place to do their job in a better way. But I think to do that, it's not a case of, and this is where Teamworks come in really well, and this is coming from experience of failing with some AMSs as well. I think it's fair to say we've got some in and they've not had the impact that we wanted them to, or they've not had the impact, whether that's what we've been able to do with it or how we've been able to spread it across a club and a department. It's failed. That picking something up off the shelf doesn't necessarily do it. Just saying, I'm getting an AMS, here we go, we're going to be flying, doesn't do it. You need to go on a journey and you need to work out a way that works for you as an organization.
Okay, perfect. That sets the scene nicely. Todd, if you're happy to share your screen and take us through. Obviously, we talked kind of very generally around some performance philosophies, implementation of new tools, alignment of data, the future AI. But ultimately, it comes back to an athlete management system that supports this vision of where we all want to go as performance practitioners. Yeah, do you want to set the scene there, Todd? And I suppose in doing so, a lot of the best EPL teams are all moving towards Teamworks AMS. I know you're going to take us through a bit of a journey here now, but just touch on some of those crucial conversations of why that's happening and why people are deciding to use Teamworks AMS and what separates it, as Aman's saying, from some of the other competitors in the market.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm just going to take a bit of time now to go through kind of AMS and do a bit of a walkthrough. Just to give a bit of context, we've decided to kind of frame this a little bit around like a day in the life of. So rather than us just flicking from module to module, we'll try and work through a typical day, I guess, we'll use a football club as an example with having a man on, but going through that process of the athlete waking up, getting into training happening, and then that training kind of finishing, and we'll try and walk through that process of what that looks like. So,
Todd, just very briefly, while you're doing that, guys, that we're going to have 10 minutes at the end for questions. Drop those questions into a direct message to me, and we can either talk about them afterwards or we might interrupt Todd and he can talk us through something that's relevant for that stage of the demo. So don't be shy about those questions. Go for it, Todd.
perfect. Hopefully, everyone can see my screen all right. But we're going to start with kind of that perspective of the athlete, and I've got a short video here which I'll talk over. But effectively, the start of the day, the athlete wakes up, and kind of our first kind of instinct here is to provide the app to them. So Teamworks AMS has an app that's available for all staff and players to use to enter data. And what we're utilising here is a reminder would be sent to the player in the morning for them to complete their wellness questionnaire. So they'll open that app. One of the key things for us is making this as simple as possible to get into that app. So want to be able to log in quickly and also that data entry being very quick as well. The example you'll see here is a example of a wellness form that we collect. So this club in question here has decided to ask questions around sleep, fatigue, mood, soreness, and all different types of questions. As I mentioned, it's kind of really important for us that this entry is quick and efficient. I think the modern day athlete is very much training, and I'm probably very guilty of myself of TikTok has probably walked the minds a little bit, and the attention span more than 10 seconds now is pretty difficult. So for us, it's really key that how can we make this as quick as possible and as simple as possible to get that information in. And you can see in this example, we're collecting subjective measures from the athlete. I think it's really important to note that while we're collecting this subjective information from the athlete directly via the app, at the same time, we've got our integrations, so our wearables. Pretty much every athlete nowadays is wearing a Garmin, an Apple Watch, a Whoop Band, an Oura Ring, you name it. They're wearing something, and that captures really good information, whether it's on their sleep, their recovery, the activities they're doing. But what we've got in this instance is, yes, the player is entering that subjective information, but we've also got that objective information flowing into the system as well. And we'll touch a little bit more onto that as we get into the practitioner level. But you can see this player will go through only a couple of seconds to get that information, which would be really valuable for the practitioner. But
I
this
think
next
as well, Ty, the key thing about that for me as a practitioner side is you will have a group of players who do everything all the time perfectly. You'll have a group of guys who generally do everything perfectly well, but sometimes miss it. And that right down to the other end with someone who wakes up last minute, gets in the car, gets themselves into work, and has been on their phone probably a lot in that journey, but didn't go on the app or didn't do what you need. The fact that this can be done by the player, but then also we can have an iPad on entry or an iPad in the changing room, which gives the same form that a player can go and click their face and do it there. So we're not reliant on one touch point. In the past, I've tried systems where we've used an app, and it's generally been, let's put it on the player, they're always on their phone, let's use the app. And then if they don't do it for whatever reason, because they forgot or their compliance isn't great, you can't go and enforce it on the player because it's their phone. You can't go and get on it. Whereas here we've got multiple avenues of doing it, this being one, but also the ability to do it via ourselves and an iPad.
Yeah, I think that goes back to a point earlier, like understanding how that organization or that partner works. We have so many different people doing this in different ways. Some really love to utilize the mobile app and give that ownership to the players. As you mentioned, some will utilize that iPad when they first enter the building, stick it in the changing room. Some are still using a staff member that goes around with the iPad and pushes it in themselves because they know they're going to get it that way. So again, I think that's a really important part of having that flexibility to do that. And it's not one that fits all, but also, yeah, the PSM role that we have here at Teamworks, working close to the organisation, it's our responsibility to understand that basically and understand, well, here's the mobile app, but if that doesn't work for you, we're not going to go down that route. Let's try the alternative. So hopefully, yeah, like we have multiple options to try and do that. So I think that's a really good point. The next kind of part of that athlete one is obviously we spoke about this a bit earlier is yes, entering that information, but how can we give something back to them? And you can see here in this example that the personal insights dashboard for this player is giving them a bit of info now. Again, this can be tailored to what you want to show. And Aman mentioned there's a big education piece of explaining what this data means and just saying that because last night's sleep was 9.8 and that's better than his average. Is that better? Well, that's for the performance staff to work with the athletes to help them understand that. But this provides that opportunity for you to give something back to the players. And that's not limited to this wellness information. This could be from their GPS data, it could be from their match data. All type of information can be pushed back into this app for the players. And we do definitely see partners trying to give back to the players and the athletes. Like I said earlier, I think it really brings them on board. But while I say that, Andrew, feel wrong, obviously ex-athlete yourself, to kind of get your opinion on this. Like obviously when you were playing, kind of how important was it, I guess, to have an easy way to provide this information if that was the case, but also for yourself, like, yeah, how important was it to get a bit of feedback? And I guess that instant feedback as well, and not having to wait till the next morning or the next day to get that information back.
Yeah, it's shortening that time from the player kind of giving something to receiving something, like giving their data to receiving value or receiving assurance or basically getting something back that's going to allow them to do. Athletes are very, very single-minded. All I cared about was rugby. All your players care about is football. They just want to be as good as they can possibly be on that next training session or that next game at the weekend. So I suppose all of this, it's not difficult to, well, maybe it is difficult to see, or as a scientist, I suppose it's easy to say, well, sleep is obviously going to impact your performance. But from an athlete's perspective, they're thinking, well, will me filling out this questionnaire lead me to play better the weekend? They maybe can't see, and it's all about how that transfers. Aman, like what you're talking about, does this equal this? I think it's all about that education. For me, I was probably quite impatient, I'd say, as an athlete, and as a result, coaches were probably impatient with me. But I think it was all about that education once I started to realize, and some of my colleagues and teammates realized, doing this, being compliant allows us to be better as a team. It's all about that education and bringing athletes up to speed. So they know the why. If they know the why, they'll commit to something. I think as a general principle.
I think to defend yourselves and your group of athletes and players, the pressure put on by player and athlete asking, well, what are you going to do with it? And if I tell you this, like if I tell you my sleep was terrible, then what are you going to do? And if it's terrible for a while, then what are you going to do? Is actually very healthy for a performance group, for a practitioner, or for a group of practitioners. Because if you can't answer that, then why are you asking the question? Because I think it's a healthy thing to do. If we can't say, well, if you sleep bad, yeah, we're not really going to affect training, and you're still going to do the same S&C program, and you're still going to do everything as you would have done if you said you slept well. Then why, from a player's perspective, completely, why are you asking me to spend my time to give you accurate information? I think it's a real healthy loop that shouldn't just be regarded as, oh, can we get players to do it? No, do you have a reason to get the player to do it? Is important.
Is that why it's, I guess, the emphasis on bringing the subjective and the objective markers together? Like you say there, if a player thinks that if they give a poor sleep score, it will be negative for them, so they'll put, I slept 10 hours. But if you then have that Garmin watch telling you that this was the actual amount of sleep, it's not a case of catching the athlete out, but I guess that's what's important to bring both together to get that full picture and not just hear it from one side.
Yeah, it's what you want to get out of the subjective. I've seen now multiple ways of different practitioners, the different clubs have been at now so far, do subjective questionnaires up until like some big long ones, with everything like you mentioned: sleep, mood, happiness, fatigue, food, everything that works, like how you're feeling about absolutely everything. To where I'm at now, which is literally, as you know, well, Todd, one question, and it is that understanding of, well, can we show the athlete that we can actually impact off this, and what will we impact? Your point is correct as well. If they're worried to put something because they think it's going to have a negative connotation to their performance or their ability to play the game or whatever, you have to set the context around what that is.
Aman, you must be very popular with the players only asking one question. What is that question?
We stripped it because we did, like I say, we did our own needs analysis, and I asked the question of, right, if we're going to ask these guys how they are in two phases: acutely, so that morning when we've got the questionnaires come in, or chronically, looking at this player's trend and how things are moving. If we see it move negatively, what can we as a performance team and a performance medical team take out coaching managers, because sometimes you can influence them, sometimes you can't, sometimes you can change a session, sometimes you can't, manager can change, etc. What can we actually control and do? And our biggest takeaway from that was that it's mainly there as a screen. It's mainly there to go, look, we know we're going to get 25 players come through this door at various different points. Some are already injured, some are carrying knocks, some are fine. How do we make sure we go to the ones we need to go to faster, quicker, and check them and get them on the bed or whatever we might need to do, get them in activation earlier and really be on them? How can we do that quicker? And that's what it came to. And our single question that we found the value in that was, from my perspective, was soreness, was muscle soreness. Because low energy, things like this, you can ask the question. But number one, I don't think generally athletes can decipher between things very well. So if you ask soreness, tiredness, energy, these kind of different things, I don't think they can pick specifically well what one is. Whereas if we're asking specifically, how sore are your muscles and where do you have it? We can do things about that. If someone comes in and we see straight from them walking in, they have got 6, 7 out of 10 pain and soreness on both hamstrings. We know we've got to get hold of this guy and actually see how it is. Is it just DOMS? Is it something specific? And we can actually do something about that there and then.
Yeah, man, I think that's a really nice avenue into our next part, really, of I guess if we're moving away from that athlete perspective and putting it more into the practitioner now. Something I'm sharing here now on my screen is typically what we see a lot of practitioners utilize, and this looks very different for each organization and club, but it can be changed how you want. But it's a very typical view, and the idea of this is, firstly, it's on your front page when you log in, so no messing around. Once you're in that system, load it up, it's there and you need to see it. Some partners and organizations utilize like that, the ability to send alerts. So as Aman mentioned, if there was a soreness of a 5 or above and they wanted to flag that, that can send an alert to your staff's mobile phones, emails to them to kind of alert them on that. So if you even want that quicker access, you kind of have that choice to do that. But this is a really nice example of, we usually call this kind of a readiness profile or a readiness report. And Aman, you might have to speak a bit more in a second around this, but I see these being really useful in those morning meetings or those MDT meetings. Aman, you mentioned that having that information ready to go, so you're not scrambling around the changing room trying to work out who needs help, and you have this. So I'll briefly go through this and how it works, but the idea of these dashboards is that ability to bring data from multiple sources together. So we can see we've got our squad down the left. Our status column is pulling from our medical staff. So within the Teamworks AMS, we have our doctors and physios collecting medical information on injuries, treatment notes, and that status derives from them. So we can see this Jordan Williams is set to unavailable because he's got an injury that's keeping him out. We can see for those modified players, these might be modified due to an ongoing issue, or it might be because of their wellness metrics that we see today that we're going to modify them and limit their training. As I move a little bit more into the middle, that's then bringing in that information that we saw earlier from that questionnaire. So we can see that we've got our wellness metrics here, but we've also got this sleep hours. And this is that example of bringing that objective and subjective together. So these sleep hours are coming from their wearable, whereas the metrics we see here in the middle are the subjective measures directly from the athlete. Something, Aman, I probably want to go through with you in a second is how we interpret this. And the example we've used here is we've gone for a very simple, a 1 or a 2 out of 5 are red, a 4 or a 5 is green, and a 3 or 2 down the middle is just a blank. Seen many clubs and different organizations do this in different ways. Some are very happy to say that a 1 out of 5 is clearly bad and we want to flag this. But I've also seen other organizations, and Aman, I think you're in a similar position to this, of wanting to have a bit more context around this or making it a bit more individualistic around that player, of just because a player says they're a 1 out of 5, is that a negative thing or is that a bad thing, or is that for them usually what they put? So, Aman, I don't know if you've got kind of any examples of
I think
how.
it's more with subjective more than even objective data. We definitely do it with objective data, for having that layer, that statistical layer on top, in whichever format is best, whether that's Z scores, whether that's using more, as we do in some areas, magnitude-based inferences. But having that statistical layer to tell you actually what does this score really mean based on that individual. I think there's still a place for objective thresholds, and I still have that, where, like, if the guy's coming in and telling me his maximum soreness, like, you want to know that, or if he's right at the top, you definitely want to know. But where the nuances are good in this for me are finding the little trends that are happening when a player's we know what athletes are like. We get some athletes who are going to give us the same score every single day, and they're seeing it as here's me cheating the system, or just like here's me not caring about this because I'm going to give it the same score every day. You know that one day when he comes in and gives us a number that's slightly lower, even if it's one or two lower, we get alerted because that's significant for us. He's telling us something without telling us maybe in the numbers, without telling us, giving us a 10 soreness. He's gone from the 3 he puts every day to today's put a 5. If we don't action that, that athlete who knows he's put something different doesn't feel it, and we're missing the sign. So having these statistical ways of knowing trend, but also that this guy's telling you something that's not normal for him, I think is really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I pulled this up on my screen while you were talking, really, and that's that ability that we kind of have that tab to see our squad, and I can see that Adam Ellis has got a lot of issues, but if I go to my individual trends tab and I have that player, I can start to dive into that. And man, we've spoke about this before of having different levels to your data, kind of your level one, two, and three, and your level one is your high level. Just tell me if there's an issue somewhere, and then that level two is okay. Let me dig into that a little bit more, and that's certainly something we try and utilize in AMS here. And I think a nice example is you can kind of see his sleep duration. Okay, today's a 7, which is a little bit down, but we kind of know that his average is only 7.9. So for that player, is it really out of the ordinary? Same for other ones here, like his fatigue is only a 2, but it's usually a 3. So I think utilizing those more scientific methods of Z score, smallest worthwhile changes, to see whether that is important for that player or there is a major change for them. I think it's really important to have that ability, and you'll see here there are different ways to do that. We've mentioned using Z scores, but also just having that ability to see that data over a period of time and gain something from that and seeing whether it sits below their average. That certainly helps that practitioner to make a better decision. But yeah, hopefully it's very clear that if there's a way in which you want to do that, you have that ability to do it in many different ways. So yeah, I appreciate you kind of sharing that experience.
And Todd, what one of the other thing I suppose we talked before around different practitioners getting value from this, and if someone sleeps down or their fatigue is up or there's some issue, that's going to have implications for what they do in the pitch. It's going to have implications what they do with the S&C coach. It might have implications for their nutrition. Can all practitioners have access to this, and does this kind of allow them to have that transparency and, as you say, that 360 view?
Yeah, that's pretty much, yeah, that's how it would work. So within the system, you can decide who can access what. So that's data questionnaires or even dashboards. So some clubs utilize an all approach to everyone, that everyone can see everything that everyone enters. Some clubs approach it with, okay, we'd like to keep the medical locked down for the medical staff, but the wellness is available for everyone. I think a nice example of that, and I mentioned this earlier, was that sporting director or that performance director, really. I mentioned the word earlier, that 360 view of the athlete. And this is a really nice example that we see here, and we call these like player profiles or player overviews. But we're really seeing a shift that being able to select one player and seeing that information from every area. And I'm not just talking about performance, this is now starting to include nutrition for the academy players, education information that goes in about if players are on an IDP plan or things like that. Having that ability for a stakeholder to go in and see that player and make a decision about them, it is really important. And that's where we're trying to get with the AMS, that it's that operating system for your entire performance team and staff. It's not just for your S&C coach. And this is a nice example here. I'll stick with the same player of Adam, but I can see in a snapshot here, like this has been his availability for the last couple of months, a lot of greens, which is good. If I want to know a little bit more about his wellness, I can dive into there and I've got different charts, or I can see what his average is and his most recent. If I want to go into that skin folds area and get some information around that. So you'll kind of see this example here of just being having that ability to open it up when you need to. If you don't need to see the GPS data, you just close that down and you don't need to see it. If I'm really interested in seeing, okay, where's this player fit from a physical standpoint currently, I can just dive into that section and see that. And I think that's a really nice way to look at it and have that 360 view. And I've certainly seen with our partners that those that utilize that transparency across the group just seem to get loads more from these systems. You're not locking things down. That's kind of one of the barriers we face before people join AMS, is that data's in Excel or it's in a SharePoint and getting access to it's really difficult. So if they're making that move to AMS to open that up to the staff, I think it makes sense to have these areas where they can come and find everything about that player without having to go from dashboard to dashboard and making that really painful for that end user. So I think that's a really important aspect for people coming onto AMS.
Perfect. Todd, thanks so much for doing that. We've got a couple of questions come in into the chat box. One is kind of two questions, but it's the same sort of theme and it's kind of relevant for both of you guys. With so much data available now, what are the crucial one or two metrics that you find to be the most reliable in driving performance improvements? And then it's relevant for smaller clubs, obviously, with smaller budgets. How can they be more practical around the steps they take to benefit from innovation in that way? Go for it, Aman.
It's hard, especially at the place we're at, and that's come after years of growth. It's hard to say pick certain metrics or be quite tight. I think if you were going to hang your hat on a few, you probably want to look at more global metrics. That's what I would want to look at. Things that are a bit more performance related with regards to the whole system working together at once rather than isolated. If we're just purely looking at performance and not an injury prevention type side of things, so things like a counter movement jump. We see a lot of value ourselves, and I've put a lot of work in monitoring players' gait and having some objective data on gait analysis and how they're running and also sprinting, because we see these kind of actions, the jump and a sprint and a run, as high-end explosive actions that require the whole body as a system to be functioning well. And when we see deviations from the norm in these kind of actions and how the athlete's producing the action, it's probably a good indicator that something in the system is compensating or changing, or the athlete's finding different strategies for some reason, which can then help us then delve deeper into looking into that. So if I can hammer on them. And then in terms of controlling innovation, I think it's within, as I mentioned earlier, within your environment and your team, whatever it might be, you have to all be transparent in knowing what challenges do we have as a team, what things can't we do that well, or that we don't have, what areas do we not have information on, what things, if we had, would we be able to make better decisions with. So you all have the same focus of where you want to go, and then use your challenges in your world as the pathway to then finding tech or whatever it might be that's going to help you do them better.
Yeah, great stuff. Todd, have you anything to add to that?
Yeah, if I was to go on the metric, it's an interesting question. Aman went with an objective one, so I'll go subjective. But what Aman mentioned earlier, I think, yeah, those wellness questionnaires or those daily readiness, I think if you've got one, I think Aman said that they collect it on soreness. For me, that encompasses pretty much everything, and that's what Aman mentioned, is getting something that covers a lot of bases. If player comes in and they're really sore, that mood is not going to be good. That general fatigue is going to feel up. The stress is going to feel up. I think that encompasses a lot of those metrics. I see a lot of clubs and different organisations collect loads and loads of different metrics, as a man mentioned, from happiness to stress to how they're feeling. But yeah, I think if you've got that limited time to capture that, I think a man was hit the nail on the head there of capturing that soreness. Pretty much encompasses everything, and you get a pretty good idea of the player from that one question.
I would imagine, especially for more senior players, if you've been professional for 5, 6, if you're into your 30s, you really kind of know there's something not quite right. I maybe don't know exactly what it is, but something doesn't feel right. Maybe slightly less so with someone who's maybe kind of early 20s or late teens, maybe might not understand or have a perception of what that is, maybe at that stage. Okay, so that's the kind of the key couple of metrics that are kind of potentially most important. What about, we got one question, how much data for decision making is too much? And I'm worried this might get a little bit philosophical here. Aman, go for it.
It's a good question. I don't think I could put a number on how much is too much. I think you scrutinize all of your data points that you're sitting on a table and looking at, and ask them how they actually impact your decision making. If they can all give value to decision making, it's important. But as you get more data, and I've kind of now experiencing through this, what actually ends up happening is you get more information, is you get more practitioners, I feel, that are more confused than ever. It's kind of this kind of phenomenon where one goes one way and the other goes the other way. You have this period where you have more information and people are more informed, but then you get to a point where it's a inverted U shape where actually you have more and more information, and now people are less informed and they're more confused because this is telling me this, but that's telling me he's not in a good place, and this one's telling me he's doing all right, and that one says it's normal, but that's bad and that's not good. Like there's a whole confusion with it. And I think that is a space where, like we mentioned it before, AI will in the future help try and piece these things together into models that exist now. So we're utilizing some data science models at the moment to do exactly that, is get the data science experts in and pool our data together, all these things, the different constructs, and to help us understand really where is this player. And I think AI in the future will help do that quicker. But I think now when you've got a lot of this data, I think you've just got to be key in your performance question. If it's performance, you're looking at what are our key performance indicators, what are the ones that we believe in that are telling us about the function of this athlete and going on them.
Todd, I've got one for you. A lot of coaches want to get their hands on these tech innovations, but sometimes they feel intimidated. How would you encourage more traditionally minded coaches towards using the likes of Teamworks AMS?
Yeah, I'll be honest, it's pretty daunting when you see it. I've shown my screen there and it looks like a lot of colors and you can see a lot of information. So I can feel how it would be daunting. I think for those traditional coaches that haven't used data yet, I think the thing we've seen is you've got to build that trust early on. And the best way to do that is find something that will provide value to them. If your coach is not really bothered about wellness and that's the thing that you bring to the table and you're collecting wellness in this system, they're just not going to feel like they're getting anything from that. So I think understanding what they want to see and how can we do that, and to that point I would start small. The system can do so much and you can go so far with it and you can get really into the weeds of the data and get loads out of it. But to be honest, I would start with that low hanging fruit. Like, is there a really simple module or workflow that we can set up that can make something easier for someone? If we can save a coach 5-10 minutes of their day by doing it in AMS, that's 5-10 more minutes to spend with their athletes, planning sessions and doing stuff that really matters to them. So for me, it's build that trust early on, and the best way to do that is pick that low hanging fruit or pick something that's really valuable to that person. And then build it from there. Once they get on board, they see the benefits that systems like this can bring and how it can help them. That will only spark ideas from them internally. You probably won't have to chase them for the next one. They'll go, okay, we're doing this in AMS. Why don't we do this as well? Because this is taking me ages. And we've seen that work really well, I think, of building that trust slowly and getting people on and used to it, and building that, I guess, that internal knowledge and education of the system that develops quite naturally then to build it more and build it out further.
Yeah, and that kind of touches on that point we made earlier on around the flexibility of the system, whatever problems you're trying to solve. And every performance department's different. They're trying to solve different problems. They might operate in the same league at the same level, but they have a different performance philosophy. So that flexibility around Teamworks AMS is a real differentiator. In the last 30 seconds, you want to just touch on that or speak to that, Todd, very quickly before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think another part of that is like, having that flexibility. I think Aman's a really great example of having someone internally that can drive that and bring that vision to life, and a clear understanding of what they're trying to achieve within that performance team. It is really helpful for us. I think, if you try and bring that to the table, you're really clear of what you're trying to achieve, making it really simple for the staff to use as well. And like I said, being able to customize to what you guys want. It's sometimes just as simple as if your coaches log into the system and it's branded in their logos, their colors, it looks like how they used to work or what they've used before. That really helps that onboarding phase. Nothing worse than when we're bringing a brand new system. It's completely different. You've never seen it before, work like that, and going, here you go and use this. So that's a really important part, I think, is making it feel comfortable and familiar for the users.
Okay, great stuff. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Todd Atkins, Aman Shergill. Thank you so much for contributing today. Really worthwhile, really meaningful, and hopefully really valuable for a lot of people listening. Thanks a lot for tuning in. If anybody wants to find out a little bit more about Teamworks Performance products, go to teamworks.com/performance. And then PSN, we're going to send a follow-up email afterwards to the list of attendees. So please reach out if you want to be connected with anyone, and you'll also get a recording. So Thanks so much, and look forward to the next one, guys. Take care.